All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about tan lines. We're talking about chapstick, the $6 million man, and killer bees from Africa. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is episode number 2 of Nice Pull. Very excited that you decided to join us yet again. I was normally going to have like a, like a long intro or some kind of a segue or some kind of a clever lead-in to this next topic, Chris. But I'm just going to come out and say it. Chapstick. I don't see it as often as I used to. I don't see people obsessed with chapstick. I know it's out there. But the other day I was in the dollar store for reasons that are probably obvious. You can get a lot of crap there for $1. Did you know you can get like readers there, Chris, for $1? You can get readers. Yeah, they're pretty good too. But I saw chapstick there, and I kept thinking, man, as a kid, it just seemed like chapstick was such a big deal. It seemed like every single kid in school had to have the chapstick in their pocket. Or in their purse, and we were obsessed with it. But maybe that's just me. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I think people had their favorite flavors of chapstick. I think mine was wild cherry, although it was kind of pink. I think, yeah, everybody had chapstick. Everybody used chapstick. Nobody could really say why. It's not like we were running around with dry, painful, cracked lips, although that's what the commercials and Suzy Chapstick would have had you say.
Hold on a second. That is a very nice poll. That was Suzy Chapstick. That's right. That's right.
She was like a skier or something. And I guess at that point, maybe, okay, because I think, yes, if you were skiing and you're up in the Alps or wherever, then maybe your lips would get a little dry, a little chapped, but most of us weren't Suzy Chapstick or Suzy Chaffee or whatever the hell her name was. So we didn't really have this, massive need for chapstick. The one thing also, I remember getting chapstick and maybe using it once or twice, and then because it was the size of, I don't know, it was 2 inches long, 1.5 inches, losing it almost immediately. Right. I never ran out of chapstick. I never thought, crap, hey, Mom, when you go to the store, can you get me some chapstick? Because I'm all out. You never ran out. Maybe you lost it. And then eventually you found it a little bit later. But it was just this thing that was always there, except when you needed it. But you didn't really need it.
Do you agree with me that if you never use those, you will never really have a problem with chapped lips? And it's the actual act of using the chapstick that creates the addiction and the ongoing problem. And now you have to have it all the time. Am I wrong on that?
So you're saying it's like a gateway, basically?
Not only is it a gateway, it's the actual producer of the problem. I'm not saying you can't go skiing or go out and get some chapped lips, but what I'm saying is using that stuff somehow propagates the need to continually use it and never stop using it.
I couldn't tell you the last time I used it by choice.
Oh, okay.
Because again, it was something like that. Yeah, it's like, oh, you need it. It's like, and my lips are chapped.
Yeah.
Okay, now they're not. I lick them and they're not chapped anymore.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's obsession with it.
Yeah.
Kids love it. Do you want some chap? Especially when someone offers you, it's like, wait, do you want some chapstick?
Yeah.
Well, you were just rubbing that all over your lips, so sure, I'll take some. It's like, no, I don't want it, and I never want it.
But I think it's like. By the way, amen. I think it's like Armor All. Right, where your car didn't really need Armor All to begin with, but now that you use the Armor All, your car is going to forever need the Armor All. It's going to crack even worse. I really do believe there's some kind of a conspiracy there, because these people, it's a cultural thing. They are lifelong lip balm or chapstick users. It never, ever ends. If you do know somebody that uses chapstick or lip moisturizer, tell me that those people don't always have to have it in their purse, don't always have to have it in their pocket, and haven't always used it as long as you've known them. It is one of those things that it makes you wonder, how often do you need to buy another one? And yet it was such a thing. How often do your lips get that cracked, right? I know we live in a desert technically out here in California, but really? And by the way, going back to Suzy Chaffee, that was her actual name. Now that I think of it, Suzy Chaffee. You're right, Chris. Yeah. And they must have approached her and then just said, "How about chapstick?" And she said, "No, it's Chaffee." And they said, "But how about this much money?" And then she said, okay, Chapstick. Yes, that is my new last name. I am now Suzy Chapstick.
I'm Suzy Chapstick. Maybe she had a lifetime supply of chapstick after that as well. To think about it, maybe she peaked. I don't know what she's doing these days. I don't even know if hopefully she's still around. Hey, she was a skier. She was probably pretty healthy, I would imagine. I'd like to think that she's out there thriving somewhere, and she's probably got really full, luscious, moist lips. I mean, at least.
We're going off on a very,
Sorry about that, Suzy.
albeit awesome topic there, tangent there. I think though that chapstick obviously was one of those things that, you know, as a 3rd, 4th, 5th grader, 6th grader, junior high, whatever, you had to have a set list of things with you at all times again, right? And my point is chapstick was definitely one of them, although I would argue you didn't really need it. Another thing when we were growing up was a comb. You had to have a comb of some kind, preferably, what do they call it, Chris? The plastic comb that every guy had.
The Goody comb.
The Goody. That's
Goody
right.
with a Y.
That's right. That's a good pull. The Goody comb, it was this just a plastic, mostly unusable comb, unless you just had a really thick coif of hair. I mean, you had to have pretty decent hair in order to even use the Goody comb. But for sure, whether you needed it or not, you had to have it sticking out of your back pocket. That was an absolute must.
You did. And then, of course, if you had straight hair, again, mine got pretty thick and pretty wiry, coinciding around the time when I hit puberty, which made my dad make jokes about me growing pubic hair on my head because he had that kind of sense of humor in the sense. But yeah,
That's
it
right.
had to be, it was more of an accessory. It was more of a look than anything else, because you're right. I don't know how useful it was. And again, so many people had long hair. I don't know how often anybody was actually combing their hair, right? Because you had too much hair to actually comb it, unless you had very straight, very fine, maybe parted in the middle kind of hair or something like that.
Well, you know, in the 70s and 80s, it is true that, especially in the 70s, longer hair on guys was a thing. So I guess the comb did come in handy. And then you get into the 80s where it's just, the hairstyles are just everything, right? From a shaved head to the extreme, the mohawk. Boy, that's a badass. Anyone doing the mohawk, that's trouble. To every other hairstyle you can imagine. But yeah, the Goody comb, the chapstick. I guess for girls in the 70s too, it was the lip gloss. I don't know that I see a lot of that anymore, but the lip gloss, at all times, your lips had to look like shiny, just shiny as hell. They had to have a gleam, a glisten. Glisten is the right word.
I mean, I guess, but did lip gloss, did that surpass chapstick? Was there like a, lip gloss versus chapstick? Did kids sort of evolve into like, oh, chapstick is for, I'm using lip gloss now. I think kids actually do use it now. Girls, I should say. I think lip gloss has a bit of a comeback if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that was just one of those things. And again, it's really weird because when you think about it, getting to, again, the lip gloss, because I think it was sort of to protect your lips, just like the chapstick. Getting back to that for a second too, when I think about the chapstick, yes, if we were like overly obsessed with how our lips were and protecting them, maybe we should have been focusing on other things, because when you look at like what was quote unquote sunblock or suntan lotion, right? Essentially it was like putting Crisco all over your body. And let's just see if we can make your skin actually pop and fry and absorb as much heat and then lock that heat in, right? Because now you'll see people that, look like they're a little sunbeaten and a little sun weathered. And, just now you can get SPF 85,
That's
which
right.
is like wearing a jacket essentially. But then it was just like, oh yeah, slap on some Bandy Soleil or something like that, or some,
That's right.
Anything like that, and you're good to go, even though it gave you minimal protection.
And by the way, for those of you that are a little bit younger, maybe weren't around back then, not only was there no such thing as SPF, but people actually openly dared the sun to burn them. Dared it. You didn't have suntan oil. You had cooking oil. You may as well have put, like you said, you may as well have just put a Crisco oil.
Wesson.
I fucking dare you to destroy the first 7 layers of my skin, is what it was.
They missed an opportunity, like what Florence Henderson and her Wessonality commercials missed an opportunity to basically say, essentially, hey, you can, put this in your pan and, cook us some hamburger, or at the same time, rub a little bit on your shoulders when you're outside, maybe at the barbecue.
I mean, Hawaiian Tropic was basically just Crisco oil that smelled like coconut, wasn't it? I mean, that's basically all it was.
And yeah, it smelled good. So obviously it's good for you. It's healthy, right? And, because nobody had ever heard of skin cancer. People would sit there with those reflectors and try, like, I'm going to get as much sun as I possibly can, right? And now all the things we've learned, hey, our lips are in pretty good shape, but I'm sorry about that melanoma you got there on your back.
Well, hold on a second. Now, that is interesting. I'm not sitting in front of the Google right now, but is that true that there weren't as many instances of skin cancer back in the 70s? Am I a dum-dum here?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think anybody... No, I think there probably were,
Oh,
but I don't think anybody thought about it. I don't think anybody thought it was preventable.
I
Right? I don't think anybody... I mean,
Right.
I definitely know it existed.
That's right.
But there's anything you and I can do to prevent... Because now it's like, hey, wearing hats, wearing sunblock, right? Kids put sunblock on their... People put sunblock before they leave the house every day,
That's
right?
right.
They
I'm
put
one
in
of
a moisturizer and they rub it in. So it's like, hey, I brush my teeth, I wash my face, and I've got 45 on my face as well, just for... And I'm not even going out in the sun, but hey, I may walk from the car to inside a building or something like that. So whereas now... I don't want to say we're overindulgent on that, but we're way away from where it's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just go out, enjoy the sun. What could happen? Well, there's a lot could happen. You could look like a lizard 30 years later, or you could get really, really sick. But your lips, man, goddamn, they were just nice and full and moist and supple.
Well, that's right. And the tan was such a status symbol. It was so much a part of our identity to have a tan. That was a big part of the 70s, definitely part of the 80s, to the point where, and you might think we're joking about this, you guys, but people actually had these metal sheets. They looked almost like cookie sheets.
Yeah, and it was like aluminum foil you put on it.
And you would stick it...
Reflector.
You would stick it under your chin, across your chest, so that the sun would actually... superheat your face. It would actually focus on your face.
You'd get more sun than you were supposed to get. It's like,
Right.
I've been out for 20 minutes. I'm getting 90 minutes worth of sun because it's like reflecting off this cardboard.
That's
it's
right.
bouncing back onto my face. And let's worry about the ramifications later. My lips are in great shape because I keep putting chapstick on. But hey, the rest of it, I might be even going blind. Right? But what was the implication on that? If you think about why did everybody care about looking tan? Because, it looked healthy? Right? You were out in the sun. And also maybe
Healthy.
you were like, maybe you lived this life of like, well, you must be at the beach.
Yeah.
You must have gone to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
You must have a pool.
Yeah.
And so the tan sort of had this extra sort of subliminal message is like tan equals what? It equals that you're affluent. It equals that you travel, any of those kind of things. When essentially all it could really mean is you were out in the sun a lot with no protection.
Yeah.
And, because even guys picking strawberries or mowing lawns or anything else who worked outside, construction workers, they were tan too.
Yeah, and as someone, and Chris, I'm sure you're in my group as well, as someone with very little, maybe no melanin in my skin at all, I never tanned. It was just a dark burn of some kind, and then I would peel. So I never was able to get into that status level. But I will say that the tan lines, that was a super sexy thing in the 70s.
Oh, God,
remember?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the coolest thing you could have was a tan line if you were a woman, right? The bikini tan line was the ultimate in cool.
Again, because what does it imply? Well, she was wearing a bikini somewhere. She must have been having a great time out in the sun.
I guess.
She may have a pool. Maybe she went to Hawaii,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that all kind of dovetails into the whole sort of like, there was that whole culture, right? I think there was, again, and you can go back to Suzy Chapstick with the ski and the beach culture, right? There was a whole look, and it didn't matter if you actually skied or you actually surfed. You looked like you did, right? It was the clothes that you wore. It was the sunglasses that you had. It was how tan you were. And was it a facade? Was it a fraud? Well, not really. I mean, was it intentional? It's absolutely intentional, right? But I think in those kind of things, it's like, here, just go out in the sun and wear these clothes, especially in California, especially in Southern California. We can take a lot of heat, be criticized for a lot of different things, and a lot of
Pardon
those
the
things,
pun. All
right, exactly. A lot of those things are valid, but at the same time, it was just, it morphed into this whole, sort of look that was, and we all, OP pants, OP shirts for guys, right?
Yeah.
And all these other clothing was Hang 10 and Lightning Bolt.
That's right.
And everything else. And there was
Lightning
a sort
Bolt.
there was a sort
my
look.
goodness. I forgot about
there
Lightning
was a
Bolt.
sort look of the OP pants and shorts, which didn't have a back pocket for some reason. So your Goody comb had to go in your front pocket.
No good.
Which worked really well next to your rainbow wallet, right? So I mean,
wow, you are on fire. Holy
so all
moly.
of those things, put together, like I said, and hey, people have always asked me, I don't know about you, a long time, especially in considering proximity. Did you surf? Well, I boogie boarded. I think I tried to surf a couple of times.
That's right.
Got my ass kicked, and I was done. Right? Had a lot of friends that surfed, but just because you were here, it was just like, no, love the beach, live near the beach now, but I'd never get back on a surfboard again.
Well, you just rattled off 5 or 6 things that you had to have if you were going to be a cool kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, especially in Southern California. So number 1, OP, Ocean Pacific, that was the brand. And they had, you guys that did not experience that, a very unique style. They were, get this, corduroy shorts.
Yeah.
Corduroy. I'm not joking. Like, that was an actual cool thing to have beachwear made out of corduroy, which makes the most non-beach friendly material possibly ever made. It was just such.
Why is my ass so sweaty? Maybe because I'm wearing corduroy.
I don't understand. And then Lightning Bolt. Yeah, that was a big brand name. Absolutely, Lightning Bolt. And then the boogie board, you guys, the boogie board that we hear about today, that everybody uses. Last episode, we were talking about the day that gum became soft and it was chewable. Well, gosh, you guys, the same thing happened with boogie boards. We used to have these styrofoam pieces of shit that were roughly sculpted into the shape of a surfboard's front end. And they were literally just a piece of styrofoam, no better than something you would use to pack something in to ship it. And that was our version of a boogie board before that. Oh, and then wrapped in the most rough burlap covering you can ever imagine, just to make sure that your nipples were sandpapered off by the third wave. Oh, and by the way, on the third wave, it would snap in half and it would be worthless.
Right. I think that styrofoam was the same kind that was those, coolers that you would pick up on the way to the beach. It was the same material. Yes. It had that little waxy handle, kind of rope, basically. So you could throw, maybe a few Shasta sodas or something like that in there.
Yeah.
You had your boogie board. Yeah. So it wasn't until the actual boogie board, which was an actual thing. That was a name. Now it's weird because boogie board is referred to other company. Boogie was Maury, right? Maury boogie board.
That's right.
And they made the boogie board. I guess they sold the name eventually because it became, you can go to any store now and buy a quote unquote boogie board.
Sure.
But it's made by somebody else, right? Target has a boogie board.
Right.
And just like so it became part of the vernacular. But yeah, that was the culture, especially for us non-surfers, when you had that actual boogie board that would last, that wouldn't break on your third wave, that wouldn't hurt to ride on it. And that was an actual thing.
It was, and I'm not joking, it was uneffing breakable. You could bend those things as many times as you want. And again, just like the chewable gum that's soft, we couldn't believe that they had somehow come up with this polyurethane, hemimedi polyalloy, whatever that mixture is.
Hopefully it didn't cause cancer or skin cancer because we had no sunblock.
Oh, and then the real status symbol back then was if you also added what to your boogie board?
A leash.
A leash. That's
Didn't
right.
Didn't come with a leash.
No, sir. That's
and not
extra.
Just any leash. Yeah. I actually had a urethane leash, which was a little more expensive.
Yeah, sure.
And my dad complained about that having the, and because I remember, your dad going, what do you need a leash for? Right. It's just like, because the second I let go, it goes flying onto the shore.
Yeah.
And then I got to get out and go get it. And so you had to have your leash. Right. And then sometimes if you were really cool, you got fins too, right? They had fins.
Well, here we go. What's the name brand of the best fins you can get?
I had duck feet. Okay. But they also had Churchills.
There you go.
Right. I preferred the duck feet.
Churchills.
Yes, Churchill in 2 different styles, and I think I probably had the duck feet because they were $4 cheaper.
Oh, Chris.
Right? Hey,
come on.
I like the duck feet. They actually look They were orange and black, so it looked like duck feet. The Churchills.
Well,
no, I get it. Okay,
well, you
I
saved
see it.
$4. Congratulations.
I saved that $4.
But the Churchills were where it was at. And by the way, in the world of fins, that was an absolute revelation to have these soft, flexible fins that were perfect for paddling in and out in the water versus what they had before then for kids our age, which was rock hard, solid plastic. They may as well have been made out of granite fins that literally broke all of your toes on the first wave.
Like you're a
because
frogman.
they were completely inflexible. It may as well have been made out of teak. These fucking fins before Churchills.
If you could get them on, because you couldn't walk on the beach,
no.
right? So you had to get into the water and then put them on, and then still walk a little bit more. You're right, like you're playing Sea Hunt or something.
Sea Hunt? Oh my God!
But again, it's like these things were ridiculous. But you're right, it was a game changer with Churchills. Yes, I had duck feet. But I know there are people that had Churchills, and you actually the weird move about those two as well. They had leashes. The fins actually had leashes that could go around your ankle in case you took one off and it went float or it got torn up, something like we're out there on a pipeline.
I forgot.
So you had a leash for your boogie board.
That's right.
2 leashes around your ankles for your fins.
That's right.
In my case, duck feet, because I saved $4.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just all of these little accoutrements that you had to have just to go to the beach.
I just tried. By the way, most kids that bought these kids that walked into the water with a leash on their left foot, a leash on their right foot, and a leash on their wrist for their boogie board, probably typically spent about 35 to 40 minutes in the water, maybe twice a month, right? That was the average kid that lived inland.
That was us.
And the beach was just like, so you're acting like this is high performance, high stakes, Olympic level competition where you have to have the best equipment and all the leashes money can buy. Oh, and by the way, a leash only really implies that the surf is like Hawaii sized, right? Like,
yes.
like you're literally trying to boogie board the pipeline as opposed to the 2 to 3 foot knee slappers that are typical at Pacific Beach or Mission Beach where we grew up. But anyway, okay, right. I digress.
Right. But I mean, that's the same, the same thing with skiing was the same sort of thing. If anybody decided to go in the snow, do a little skiing, and you had to have the same sort of, the ski bibs and the big puffy jackets and all that kind of stuff. And again, you had to make this enormous investment. Again, I can hear my dad right now complaining about it. Maybe it's like, no, we can't go to, Sport Chalet. We have to go to Cal Surplus and find the cheaper sort of puffy jackets and the gloves and the bibs and everything else.
And he had a point, Chris. How often did you really go skiing?
Not often at all.
Okay. Well, there you go. And by the way, though, let's do a callback. The 2 locations where I can actually see using it, the beach and skiing, Chapstick. I could see actually using it. Okay, now
yes.
Okay.
I mean, there was no beach equivalent to Suzy Chapstick that I remember. Right. Maybe there was.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, of course, our lives didn't just revolve around the beach. We also did a lot of stuff inland. And speaking of fashion, we talked about OP, lightning bolt, all that stuff. But what about the fashion for the women back when we were kids? Right, there was what was the name of the they had the jeans that
Dittos jeans.
The Dittos, that's right, nice.
They came in every color, if I remember correctly. And I don't want to talk in too much detail because we were pretty young, so over the passage of time, it feels kind of pervy to be talking about that too much. Sure. But we were all the same age back then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dittos jeans, and I think for girls, I can remember that was like anything else. It was a status symbol. It was a pressure thing. They wore Dittos because that was the
Dittos.
thing,
that's right. And they had a slogan: Dittos, feel the fit. I don't even know what that means.
I don't even want to think too much about that one now.
Well, their big line was, saddleback jeans. I don't even understand what that means. I guess it's how they're cut or something like that, but that was a big deal. Everyone had to have Dittos. I remember that.
Absolutely.
And, or Jordache, the French thing, right?
Right. Fancy embroidery on the pockets.
Yes.
Right. And again, all kinds of knockoffs.
Yeah.
And again, I think that gave way eventually over time to like Guess jeans and Calvin Klein and all of those things that came maybe a little bit later in the 80s. Right. But to talk about those, and again, I think, and I don't think there's anything different now. I mean, I think kids deal with that now in the clothes that they wear. But essentially, I can just remember the media, I remember the commercials, I remember the discourse all about it, right, in the sense because it was if you grew up wearing Toughskins, right? And it was just like, and all of a sudden, then maybe you graduated like I can remember getting 501s and being pretty excited about those, but they didn't come pre-washed. Remember, you get a pair of 501s.
That's right.
And it was just like, I can't wear these.
So for those of you, again, once again, I'll have to explain, back in the day, jeans, Levi's jeans, basically were pressed with as much starch as they could possibly press them with, and they came to you totally flat, like flat and pressed, so that it was just almost like they had cut them out of a canvas tarp.
They were making tents, and so then they made some jeans on the side with the leftover material.
That's right, and you had to wash them about 75 times just to get them pliable enough that you could actually stick your legs in there.
You could walk in
and
them.
Start walking in it.
And then you had to get them. You didn't get, if you were like a size, again, let's go back to some. If you were size 28, you had to get a bigger size, right, to shrink them down.
Right.
Eventually.
Oh, that's right.
And and this is another thing too. It's like, this is always around my house. It was like, for whatever reason, my mother had an obsession with, getting clothes and then you grow out of them. So I always got clothes that I had to grow into. Okay. I've got shit that I still haven't grown into because it was so big that my parents bought for me. My first like Steve Austin $6 million man sort of tracksuit didn't fit in high school, and I think I got this in like 4th or 5th grade. It was
wow!
Like, how big is this freaking thing? I'm never growing into this ever.
$6 Million Man, the greatest TV show ever, by the way, about a guy who is an experimental test pilot and crashes. And loses, let's go through the list. What did he lose? He lost an eye.
Both legs.
And his arm.
Yeah, right arm, if I remember.
But what could they do? They could rebuild him.
They could make him...
They had the technology, Chris.
Better than he was, bigger, stronger, faster.
Yep, that's right. And one of the greatest openings of any TV show I've ever seen. It has just an absolute spectacular... seat of your pants, heart pounding through your chest opening on watching him eat shit in this test vehicle as he's dropped out of an airplane and then rebuilding him with bionic parts. And man, as a kid, there was nothing more exciting until you actually got to the episodes. To this day, that could be one of the worst produced TV shows of all time. I just saw an episode about 2 or 3 months ago. It does not hold up. To say that it does not hold up is an understatement. But good intro, though. Very
Great leisure suits, Lee Majors. Of course, it lends itself to the Bionic Woman, who was like,
that's right.
Coincidentally, his girlfriend has like a similar accident and needs a similar shit. Except she doesn't get a bionic eye; she gets a bionic
legs and an ear. She got the ear.
Right, right. So I mean, no, doesn't hold up. I mean, none of that stuff holds up.
And you're probably wondering, if you're listening, was there ever a bionic dog? And the answer is yes.
Max.
It was a German Shepherd, as I recall.
Max.
The bionic dog.
They fought Bigfoot, aliens.
Oh yeah, Bigfoot.
And always while wearing a leisure suit.
And by the way, Bigfoot, as I recall, also bionic, because later on you learn that it's not really Bigfoot. It's some kind of a robot. That was a big thing back then, to have androids, humans that looked. No, robots that looked human, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Movies on that, a lot of those, the Westworld and
that's
the Future
right.
World and movies like that.
Yeah.
Even to the point, those were, and so we were pretty convinced, right, at that time. It's like, well, those are just right around the corner, right? It's like, maybe there's a robot in my class. Maybe there's a robot at school. Maybe the teacher's a robot.
I'm not sure how active your imagination was, Chris. That's were you on special medicine as a child? What is going on?
I think I'm
not so sure that I made that leap, but okay.
Well, I mean, I think I wanted it to happen, right?
Okay.
It would have been really cool, right? It was one of those things like, wouldn't it be cool if, just like you thought it'd be cool if you had a bionic eye.
Right. And by the way, bionic, for those that don't know, is this is the term for anything that is machine-like, that is somehow now implanted in your body, right? Like a cyborg. So that's bionic.
Sorry, I didn't
that's
explain that.
Anything inside the human body that's a machine, that's bionic, by God.
Right.
I love the Bigfoot episodes, though, of the $6 million. And by the way, $6 million, Chris, that's how much it costs to make him. Can you imagine? That was a big deal back then. $6 million to build this guy.
Right.
But one of the things that I liked about the Bionic Man and the whole Bigfoot thing was just the times back then in general, where we really loved our campfire stories. And again, we really loved our conspiracies and our cryptozoological animals like Bigfoot. And then what's Bigfoot's cousin that we loved back then that lives in the water, obviously?
The Loch Ness Monster?
There you go. The Loch Ness Monster, of course.
Right.
We loved the Loch Ness Monster in the 70s and 80s. And then up in the sky, right? We loved those UFOs. And it seemed like every TV show, every episode of whatever we saw, there was at least one episode that dealt with Bigfoot or definitely UFOs. Definitely the Brady Bunch episode where Greg was trying to trick everybody into believing that there was a UFO.
Right.
Right. And then we had a bunch of other episodes too, where there was always a UFO episode. Even Green Acres had a UFO episode. For
Happy Days had Mork, right? Mork,
that's right.
That
Mork,
was the thing.
The
so
whole
they
entire
had
alien thing. I forgot about that.
I mean, so then you're going back to the 50s, and maybe it was, maybe that was their thin sort of Roswell and Area 51 sort of reference. I don't know, but no, those were always, we were obsessed with those, and I think, again, I wanted to believe it, right? I wanted to think. You hated stuff being disproven. There's no Loch Ness Monster. Here's what it is, right?
Right, sure.
The Bigfoot, that old grainy Bigfoot picture, that footage that everybody has seen, or at least everybody saw at our age, that maybe Leonard Nimoy spent a whole episode of In Search of talking about it, right? You could the fact that you could watch entire shows, right, just based on that concept, rather than have the concept threaded into a weekly episode of the $6 Million Man or the Brady Bunch or something like that, in the sense. But man, they're entire shows, entire movies, and I guess they are now, right? There are websites, there are podcasts, right? There are things like that devoted to all of these things.
Sure, but I would argue that it was a kinder, gentler world back then when it came to conspiracies or fantastic, hidden animals. So speaking of In Search of, for everybody at home, that was a TV series that starred Leonard Nimoy, of course, Mr. Spock. And later on in my life, I was working at a Hollywood studio, and we were doing some editing for that very show. They were going to put it out again on DVD. And I talked to one of the producers of that show, and I kept asking her, how did you do these kind of reenactments and stuff, like, the lost city of Atlantis and all that? I mean, that was pretty decent special effects. And she looked at me like I was insane and reminded me that the Lost City of Atlantis episode, they literally went into Leonard Nimoy's backyard, went underwater into his swimming pool, and just stuck like a pyramid that was actually an ashtray in the bottom of his pool. And I thought, man, I guess as a kid, you really fill in the gaps. You really suspend disbelief. I did not remember that's how shitty the special effects were.
That's awesome and disappointing at the same time.
Yeah.
Because obviously they're dealing with a $47 production budget.
They literally were.
And then they probably had a surplus because they only went, or unless Leonard took a kickback on, hey, you're using my pool and my ashtray.
That's right.
Right? But that's, and I think that's the thing. It's a lot of these things, when you talk about a show that doesn't hold up, I don't think, maybe even our perspective doesn't hold up. Because, again, maybe I don't want to say we're gullible. We wanted to believe this crap, right? And we wanted it to be real. And because you want something else to be out there, right? You want something else to be, just be super cool, and not everything you've sort of learned, that there are these other sort of possibilities.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, and I think in that exact vein, we really tried in the 70s and 80s to stick round pegs into square holes, or vice versa. We really wanted these conspiracies to be true so badly, me being the top there.
You still do.
I still, by God, you guys, I still believe in Bigfoot. I'm holding out, and I definitely believe in UFOs and extraterrestrial stuff, because why not, damn it? But Bermuda Triangle is something that really was a big deal back in the 70s, and to an extent in the 80s. But that's a great example of just somebody kind of going, hey, things disappear in the ocean. Let's just draw a triangle and say this area. But I think later on, if you were to look, right, and actually do the evidence, it would show that they disappear all over the world. It's not just in this triangle.
Right.
And I don't think that there ever really was anything to that. But by God, for a long time, we thought there's a certain section, a triangle, off the coast of Florida out there in the Bahamas and and all
Bermuda.
that. Yeah, of course, Bermuda, the very thing. Yes, sir. Where all these ships and airplanes were disappearing, and Who knows? But it does seem like it's gone away, right? We don't have that happening.
They don't
anymore.
talk about it too much, you know. And I think that was the cool part. You remember, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Of course,
right? Came out in '77. They tried to they very smartly they explained it. The opening scenes are a bunch of planes showing up in the desert, and they all disappeared. You know, between 1942 and 45 over the Bermuda Triangle. Eventually, those pilots came off the ship. For those of you who haven't seen Close Encounters, I'm sorry if I'm ruining any of it. If you haven't seen Close Encounters, go watch it.
By the way, it's half a century old, that movie.
It is.
So
it holds up. It holds up
this...
much better than $6 Million Man. But at the same time, so they had so it was kind of cool. They weaved that in, right? Here's how we're explaining. We're using it as a plot device, and now we're solving one of those mysteries that Leonard freaking Nimoy couldn't solve on his own, right? So very creative in that regard. But yeah, that was one of those things. We heard about those things, and I think maybe that's the difference too. Is we heard about those things, and we did not have the resources to actually learn about them on their own. If you had to rely on Leonard Nimoy, if you had to rely on what somebody told you, you know, when you're, you know, throwing the Nerf ball around the backyard, if you had to rely on, well, my next door neighbor's cousin's best friend's uncle said, we had to rely on all those things. There was no way to counter those arguments. Right. Grainy photography. That's got to be real. Look at that. That's a sea monster.
I mean, that is such an excellent point, because back then, everybody, we did not have the internet. The only thing you could do was go to the library, which only had a set of books that were donated to the library. I mean, you couldn't go beyond that. Maybe you could get into the microfilm, which is this teeny tiny little bits of information on film that you could look through not even a microscope. It was like a glorified
Weird
overhead projector.
Right. And you could turn the crank and watch
you could look at old newspaper articles. But my God, I mean, that's why our imaginations really ran away with us, because we didn't have any way to verify anything. But yeah, that Bermuda Triangle. And by the way, well said on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That is one of the greatest opening scenes of any science fiction film I've ever seen. And I'm going to do a deep poll here for you. That was the infamous Flight 19, which actually did disappear over the Bermuda Triangle. And they reported seeing weird lights. Their instruments started spinning. It was supposed to be just a routine flight there and back to just do a little practice run. And all of them disappeared. And then the airplane that they sent out to find them also instantly disappeared. So that is kind of weird.
It's too deep.
We're not sure what happened, but
wow.
What a great scene when they go in the desert and they find them just sitting there perfectly pristine, as if nothing had happened in the last 40 years. That was a great movie.
Right. And I guess, and the things, again, we didn't even when we went to the library, and maybe if you looked at the latest edition of Encyclopedia Britannica, and if you didn't have that, for some reason, we got those all the time in my house.
Britannica.
Right, and that was like your research, but like they didn't, they had all the bullshit about, I don't know, Manifest Destiny and, things in the Louisiana Purchase. You couldn't really find any cool stuff about like Bigfoot or UFOs.
No.
Why? Well, probably because it was all hearsay.
Yeah.
There was no actual evidence. There was no actual, information that could be verified. So looking back, I understand that. So we had to rely on rumors. We had to rely on Leonard Nimoy. We had to rely on speculation and all of those kind of things. But again, you relied on it. Again, I did, because you wanted it to be real. You wanted it to be cool. It's like when you look at some of these current movies and like the ones, let's say, I'll throw one out that was, a few years back, that was the film Arrival, right?
Yeah.
And where essentially in the middle of the day, right, all these, I don't know, you want to call them UFOs, these crafts just appear out of the sky. And they take its normal everyday situation. Like all of a sudden we're sitting here and it's like, you got to come outside, right? And there's a spaceship hovering, above. And so it becomes instantly real, instantly relatable, because there's no ray guns, there's no lightsabers, there's no anything. You don't have to jump out of like your current mindset.
Right.
It's just there.
Yep.
And it becomes like, I could kind of relate to that. That would be, what would you do if you woke up and there was somebody, a ship floating over your house? So, I think we kind of wanted that. We wanted someone to say, hey, here's a news bulletin about, they caught the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot ate a dude and they had to shoot him. You wanted to see that, right? You wanted it to be real.
Yeah.
The stuff like that you wanted to be real, in the sense of like, there were a few things I didn't want to be real. Like, my brother, who used to love to just sort of torment me with crap like this, used to tell me about killer bees, right? Remember the thing about the killer bees?
God.
The killer bees
That's
are in
right.
Africa,
That's
and they're gonna fly over the ocean, and they're gonna. I think there's even a movie about killer bees, or killer bees became part of the vernacular, almost like a joke. But it was just like, I was terrified of killer bees.
Yeah. Because
it was just like, they're going to come and they're not just going to sting you. They're going to kill you. You're going to get swarmed and that kind of stuff. And again, I just had to go on his word. Now I had to go on like, yeah, shit, he tells me killer bees are coming. I'm screwed, man.
Nowadays, we have information coming at us from 1 trillion different sources. But you guys, back then, with only 3 networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and only a couple other types of ways you could ever hear anything, mostly hearsay, we believed everything. And killer bees, oh my God, we heard that there's these bees in Africa, and they have them, but they're coming over here, like Chris said. They're going to make it over the ocean by killing people on boats and then traveling across the ocean. And once they get here, it was going to wipe out the entire population of the United States. And then once kids took over and started adding their own urban legend, right, like we talked about last episode, it was 1 sting and you're paralyzed. Oh, yeah. 2nd sting, you know, your heart stops. And if, by God, if you do the 3rd sting, something worse than heart stops. I don't know what's worse than your heart stopping, but boy, 3 stings, Chris, that's it, man. You're done.
And I guess, but don't by nature, once you get stung
was
by
there
a bee,
ever a killer bee that killed anybody in the United States?
Well, then, like,
sorry,
once a bee kills you, but then a bee stings you and it dies, right?
Right.
So in theory, you need a hell of a lot of killer bees because, like,
that's right.
It's just like, hey, dude, it's like the one that thinks, okay, you go sting that guy, I'm gonna get this guy over here.
Right.
These bees were like so like advanced,
right? That's right.
That they could sort of have like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. They were like. Again, they were like terrorists. And like, here's our strategy.
Right.
All right, you guys got the Northeast. We're going to go in the Southeast. The rest of you got to get your ass and you got to start going west.
But as a kid, you don't think about the logistics, right?
No.
And by the way, for someone that already has a bee allergy, does it really matter if it's a killer bee? Any bee will kill that person. So I think the only people that I envied were people that already had these horrific bee allergies, because they're like, dude, I don't fucking care if it's a killer bee. I'm just worried about any bee. I live in constant fear already.
Right.
Every bee's a killer bee to me. In fact, you know, even a wasp could take me out.
The thing is we were at the beach as kids, and my aunt had a bee allergy, got stung, and her like ankle was this like size of a cantaloupe,
oh my
like
God.
Instantly. So of course, there's my brother going, see? And it was just like, look, again, knowing that's the bee allergy, but again, she didn't die. That, you know, I think she had to get like a shot. It's whatever.
Well, that was obviously a near miss, but I don't know. I think they're still out there, just waiting.
So until next time.
Right on. Until next time.
We'll see you on Nice Pull.